everyone, Heather here with PersephoneReturns.com, and today I'm back with another weekly forecast. This one is from Monday, July 16th, all the way through to Sunday, July 22nd of 2018. And this week, luckily, is a lot calmer than last week, and it's much, much calmer than next week will be as we come into next week's super chaotic eclipse that's going to be happening in the sign of Leo in a T-square with Uranus. And so right now, we're kind of in this sort of middle ground period between eclipses in the middle of eclipse season. So we're coming off of that energy of surrender, of purge, of emotional catharsis, of doing the deeper inner work and figuring out what it is that we truly need to surrender in order to make space moving forward to create something better in our lives, right? And I talked about this very deeply with my teacher and my friend, Robert Phoenix. And you can watch that video. I'll post the link in the description below, but I think it's the last video that was posted prior to this one. If you haven't seen it yet, we did a really good talk about the general energy of the eclipses throughout this eclipse cycle on more of a global scale, but also a lot of practical sound advice for how to utilize this energy yourself in your own life. And just as a sort of disclaimer or forewarning, there is a little bit of political content in there, just as there always usually is when I do have a conversation with Robert. So if that's not your thing, feel free to skip over it. But there is a lot of good information in there. So I do hope that you watch and people have been really enjoying the video. So go back, watch that video. But this week we're sort of in between that eclipse that just happened and the next eclipse, which we also talked about in that video, which is happening a full moon in Aquarius, a total blood moon lunar eclipse in conjunct Mars in a T-square with Uranus. And so that's going to be a really intense sort of energy that's going to bring a lot of change, a lot of need to surrender control. And that's sort of the theme of this week as well. At the beginning of the week, it's kind of mellow. We have the moon, moving through the sign of Virgo into Libra, into Scorpio. We'll have the first quarter square of the moon on Thursday, which is the first sort of crisis of commitment to whatever intentions, whatever energies were seeded at the time of the eclipse last week on Thursday, the eclipse in Cancer. But other than that, there's not a lot of planetary energy. There's not a lot of, crazy, chaotic influence that's going to be happening at the first half of this week. As we come into the weekend, though, there's going to be actually a really strong energy with Mars. And so Mars is actually going to be making its second of 3 conjunctions to the South Node. The South Node, for those of you who are not aware, represents our past, right? It's in astrology, I always tell people that when I do readings that it's the path that we're moving away from that we've already mastered in previous lifetimes or in previous experience in this lifetime. It's what feels comfortable to us, but when we dwell there, things don't necessarily work out for us, and it prevents us from actually moving forward on our path, which is represented by the North Node. That's the path that we're moving into in this lifetime. It's what we feel excited about, but we also feel ambivalent because it's a little scary. It's something that we've never done in this lifetime or in previous lifetimes, so it feels very unfamiliar. So there's this sense of ambivalence toward jumping into the North Node, and a lot of times people might gravitate toward their comfort zones, which are represented by the South Node. But we find when we do this that we don't feel satisfied with life, right? We don't feel satisfied with what it is that we're doing when we're dwelling too long in the South Node, and things kind of get a little messy when we dwell on the South Node as well. And so when we're talking about the South Node in transit, it's a similar energy. And so the South Node right now in the sign of Aquarius represents a path that collectively we're moving away from, which is a dogmatic form of belief systems. It's like rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about conforming to the hive mind to a certain extent, even though it is in the sign of Aquarius, which is thought to be a sign that's more unique and more rebellious and all of that. But they're rebellious to the extent that, they can get on board with collective rebellion, right? They want to still be part of a group because it's a very group-oriented sign. It's about, groups of people connecting with people on a more global scale. And so when we have Mars conjunct the South Node, first and foremost, Mars is in retrograde right now. So Mars actually already came into a conjunction with the South Node on June 8th. So if you think back to that time period on around June 8th, so the first, second week of June, think about what was coming up for you in the area that is being affected by this Mars conjunction to the South Node, which we'll talk about when we get into the forecast for all 12 signs. But when you're trying to figure out what's happening for you and how you need to deal with it, reflect back to that time period and see if you can come up with, anything that sticks out for you involving the themes of, willpower, anger, aggression, things that came up for you where you had to act on your own volition, or things where you had to surrender your free will, where you had to surrender your ability to take action. You had to surrender your physical power in some sort of way. Because when we have the Mars conjunct the South Node also represents surrender, right? It's the path that we're moving away from. It's the past. And so a past mode of utilizing our willpower, a past way of taking action, a past way of expressing our anger out in the world might come up for us, but it's not in resonance with what's going on right now, right? So it's part of the past. It could even be that you feel angry about something that, is from the past, and you bring it up in some sort of argument, and you're like, well, and your partner or whoever you're arguing with is like, well, that was 8 years ago. Why didn't you bring that up then? So these types of things can definitely come up during this Mars retrograde period, especially conjunct the South Node. But really what this does, it's about understanding power. It's about understanding your willpower specifically. It's about understanding how to take action appropriately out in the world. And also it's about expressing your willpower. It's about expressing anger in a way that's appropriate out in the world. Even with Mars in retrograde, it kind of reverses the way that we express anger out in the world normally. So if you tend to be somebody who has maybe like a weaker Mars or an afflicted Mars, and you bottle up your anger, you don't just let it out when it's necessary to do so, and sometimes maybe it comes out inappropriately, or it comes out passive aggressively. You might be more overt in expressing your anger, expressing those aggressive energies, and if you're somebody who normally is overly expressive of your willpower, you're constantly going and forcing your way into situations, this is a time when you might find yourself taking more of a backseat, more of an observer sort of role. And if you're not doing that, maybe you should be, right? And this South Node conjunction will make sure that happens, because it's about there's a sense of surrendering control when it comes to exercising and acting on your willpower when you have Mars conjunct the South Node, because, it is action and willpower, and the South Node is surrender. And so, this is a time period during this eclipse season in general when, fate steps in, right? And so this is sort of a contradictory energy where we have Mars, which is all about taking action, acting of your own free will. And then we have the South Node, which is all about fate, destiny. It's about the past. It's about loss, letting go, and surrender as well. And these two energies that don't seem like they're very congruent are coming together, and that can be very difficult for a lot of people, especially people who believe that they have control of every single thing that they do and every decision that they make in their lives, because sometimes things come up, and we all know that we've had these situations where things don't go always as we plan. Sometimes we push and it just doesn't happen. And take that as a sign, if that's what's coming up for you this weekend, that maybe you need to rethink your plan, or maybe you need to take a step back and wait. That could be another thing, because there are events that are transpiring and unfolding around us that we really need to be paying attention to. We need to absorb with the change that's already coming organically without our intervention, because when we have eclipse cycles like this, when we have these really powerful eclipses, especially if they're hitting important points in your chart, change will come, but it's not necessarily going to be the change that you have decided that you want, or it might not come about in the way that you've decided that you want it to. Sometimes also it'll come about in the way you decided that you want it to, but the results will be different, right? And the reason that this is happening is because what you think you want is not necessarily what the plan is. It's not necessarily what's best for your path. And so even sometimes when it seems a little bit difficult, a little trying, a little turbulent during these eclipse cycles, usually, even if it takes a few years to see it, the end result is that, wow, this experience threw me on a whole new path and a whole new direction in life. And I am so glad that this happened, because A, B, C, and D wouldn't be the way that it is if this event didn't occur. And so, that's the nature of eclipse season. But so this weekend, we're coming into this Mars retrograde conjunct the South Node energy. It's more passive energy in terms of we need to, it's more active in the sense that we need to actively surrender control, actively surrender the need to be pushing our willpower and pushing up against all these obstacles, pushing up against, fate or whatever is transpiring to try to make things happen in the way that we want it to happen, right? So active surrender, right? That's kind of like Mars conjunct the South Node. We also have sort of a more like chill, laid back, lackadaisical energy happening with Venus in a sextile with Jupiter, which is happening on Sunday. And so that's going to be a more pleasant energy to sort of counterbalance any of the frustration, the struggle that you might be coming up against with Mars conjunct the South Node. And again, if you're feeling that struggle, that's a sign that maybe you need to surrender or take a step back, right? But so we'll have this energy with Venus in a really nice sextile with Jupiter, and that's going to make things a little bit easier. It's going to help you to relax, take some time out. Sunday's a really good day to just do nothing, to just veg out, chill, do something relaxing, disconnect and disengage, do something that feels pleasurable to you, right? That's Venus. Venus is about pleasure. And even in the sign of Virgo, which is a little bit more service oriented and wanting to do things for other people and, constantly be on the go, this is still the energy with Jupiter involved where you can just kick back and relax a little bit. So, take advantage of that, especially if you're feeling a lot of tense energy with the eclipse coming up or, coming off of the previous eclipse or with this Mars energy that's, happening in all of our charts and all of our lives right now. And so, yeah, so this is all about this week is about learning how to activate and utilize your will appropriately and learning when you're sort of overstepping and doing too much, and learning to surrender in those circumstances and allow, events to sort of unfold as they will before you start taking action again, right? And pushing up against these obstacles. And also about expressing anger and standing up for yourself if that's something that you don't normally do, or letting go of old anger and old resentment. That's going to be a huge theme. So if you've been bottling something up for way, way, way too long, it might explode out into the open, or you might be on the receiving end of that. But that's for a reason, because it's, it can become very toxic when you're holding anger and resentment, frustration, these types of energies in the body for far, far, far too long. And so this is a really potent time of release and letting go of any old anger, any old sort of vindictive energies or anything like that you might have stored away that might come up and resurface around this time period. You might have had that come up the first time around and it's coming back again. And this is the time when maybe you have to actually let it go. So that way the third time that this passes, which will actually be in September, on September 22nd, that'll be the resolution point of this transit. You'll see that there are some positive results that are occurring because you were able to let go and surrender during this time period. So I hope that makes sense to you all. And, always, I love when you guys let me know, what's going on for you. So feel free to comment below. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of my input if that's something that you want. But yeah, I'm always interested, especially eclipse season. What's happening for all you guys? What are you all going through? Maybe I'll do like a live stream or something sometime in the next couple of weeks and we can all chat or something. If you guys would like that, let me know if you would like that too, because I've been thinking about that. But anyway, so we're going to get into the forecast for all 12 signs. And as always, this is just a general forecast. And so it's usually best to listen to your rising sign first, your sun sign as secondary. The rising sign will be usually most accurate, but if you don't know your rising sign because you don't have your time of birth, the sun sign will give you a lot of really great information. And if you listen to both, you'll get a more nuanced, accurate interpretation that has a little bit more like layers of information. And so, yeah, so that's what's going on here. And if you want to book a personal astrology reading with me, you can always do so at the link in the description below. I do have a little bit of a wait period right now just because of eclipse season, and everybody always books readings when, the astrology gets a little crazy. But absolutely, I'm always happy to do readings for you guys. So you can do that as well if you want a more personalized astrology reading that's all about you. And so let's get started. We're going to start here with Aries and Aries rising. All right, so for Aries, this is going to be happening in your 11th house of friends. And so this is about surrendering power and control when it comes to your social circle or maybe some sort of group that you're a part of. This could also have to do with like charitable organizations that you're a part of, humanitarian types of efforts, but really this is about your social circle, or usually it's about your social circle. And so this could be about letting go about what other people think about what it is that you're doing, letting go of old resentments or anger that you're holding on to towards friends or people people in your social circle. This could also be somebody unloading their anger and aggression on you. Or this could be a need to actively surrender certain friendships and certain relationships in your life that are really toxic to you, that are causing you to feel much more stress and much more frustration, or that are influencing you to act in ways that are outside of your own integrity or your own truth. And so this is a time when, different situations that are very frustrating, that are a little bit turbulent, that are a little bit volatile, I would say, could come up in your friends and within your friends and your social networks. And so if you are somebody who maybe doesn't normally stand up for yourself, maybe this is a time when you have to learn to access your willpower and to engage with that. Maybe there is some sort of past resentment or past anger that you're holding on to, or that a friend is holding on to, that might come up. But if that does come up, this is a really important time period when you can, bring it out into the open and then surrender it, let it go. Or maybe you decide not to bring it out into the open because you realize that you really should just let it go, right? It's not worth bringing up. It's not worth causing the conflict and chaos, just to prove a point, or just to, get your revenge, or whatever it is that it is, right? It depends on the person. It depends on the situation, but there could be some sort of turbulence that comes to your friends, your social networks this week. And, really, the end result of this is going to be you figuring out how to properly express your anger, how to properly take action within your friend groups without overdoing it or underdoing it, or, acting from a place of acting out of something like a past experience instead of acting on what's happening in the present moment. All right, for Taurus and for Taurus rising, this is actually happening in your house of career and public reputation. And so this could be some sort of situation that, and thinking back also, I should have mentioned this for Aries, of course, but thinking back to that time period around June 8th, if something came up for you in terms of your career, your public reputation, and what it is that you're doing out in the world, now is a time when that might come back up for you, right? And it could be something that was very frustrating. Maybe you did something and you took action and it was way over the top, and you have to kind of take a step back, rein it in, surrender, let go, and just watch as things unfold before you take action again. It could also be that there's some sort of hostility that you're holding on to toward the people in positions of power over you, or it could even be that you're in a position of power and authority, and you have some sort of hostility or resentment toward the people that work for you. And maybe that's going to come up this week, and maybe you need to either act on it or decide that you're going to surrender it and let it go. But either way, it needs to be released, right? You can't continue to hold on to this and harbor it. You could also have bosses and people in positions of authority over you that are maybe holding on to the resentments that bring it up to you, or there could be some sort of argument or dispute involving people in positions of authority, or involving your work in general and your career in general, where you really need to just let it go and just move on from it, right? Maybe you do need to release it if you're somebody that doesn't normally express your anger overtly in this way. Maybe this is a time when you really need to stand up for yourself, but otherwise it would be a time when you really need to release and let go and just move past things. And then for Gemini, and also for you, Taurus, let's back up. For you, Taurus, this is actually, especially if you have your sun, moon, rising within the first 10 degrees, because this is happening at 5 degrees in the sign of Aquarius, this will be squaring your sun, moon, and rising. And so there could be a lot of anger or tension or something that's directed right toward you that comes out through your work, through, people in your workplace, through, some sort of work-related situation. And so it's going to feel there's going to be a lot of tension and a lot of pressure on you to act. And so, just make sure that if you do take action, you're very clear on the action that you're taking, and you're not taking action out of some sort of past resentment or something that you're harboring from the past. You're clear in the present moment, and you're clear as to what you're doing and why you're doing it. Otherwise, I would recommend, for most people that have Taurus and Taurus rising, again, it depends on your chart, just, practicing the art of surrender, letting things go, not letting things get way too over the top, and just seeing how things unfold before you move forward. If there is something that comes back up to be addressed, address it, but don't, be overly aggressive about it. Make sure that you're not taking action too impulsively or anything like that. There'll be plenty of time for that next week when we have Uranus involved. So that's Taurus and Taurus rising. For Gemini and Gemini rising, this conjunction between Mars and the South Node is happening in your ninth house. The ninth house is the house of foreign travel. It's the house of higher education. It's the house of learning through experience. It's the house of your beliefs, your philosophies, the way that you sort of frame the world through your religious values, through your moral values, those types of things. And so you might be holding on to some sort of really strong belief about something. Maybe you want to argue the point to death. Thinking about what happened around the time period of June 8th and all of that can be helpful to get clarity on what's going on for you right now. Maybe you acted in some sort of way. Maybe you decided to initiate a trip or some sort of higher educational process, or maybe even you yourself decided to teach somebody else something. And maybe you have to go back and revisit. Maybe you jumped in too hard and too fast, and maybe you need to surrender, let go of control, and allow things to play out before you move forward again and make another decision. This could also be some sort of anger, hostility, resentment, aggressive energy that's coming. That's either coming from you towards somebody in a foreign country, or somebody who is a teacher or plays that teacher role, or maybe even a father figure in your life, that you either have to express it so you can move past it and let go, or you have to make that decision that you truly are going to let go of it and you're not going to harbor that resentment anymore. It could also come to you from those exact same types of people from the outside in, right? And so you might be on the receiving end of something like that, but you're going to have to decide, am I going to pursue this? Am I going to fight back? Or should I just surrender and let this go so I can move on with life, right? And so that's part of the process that's going on there. If there was some sort of circumstance involving travel that you initiated, maybe you find that it's not going to be going exactly the way that you thought it was. And so you have to revisit that energy. But in general, it's going to have to do probably with like some sort of higher educational pursuit. Maybe you have to go back and redo some sort of exam or something like that. It's really frustrating. Or you have to confront, a teacher about a grade that you got. There could be, any number of things that have to do with this area. It just depends on your specific chart and situation. But the main theme here is needing to understand what's blocking you from dealing with this effectively using your willpower, right? So are you overdoing it? Are you underdoing it? Are you being too shy and reserved? Or are you just like jumping head first and, maybe being a little too aggressive about it, right? And so that's for Gemini and Gemini rising. For Cancer and for Cancer rising, this energy is happening in your 8th house. The 8th house is the house of passion. It's the house of sexuality. It's the house of power struggles. And so this could bring up power struggles for you. It could be power struggles, within a marriage partnership. It could be power struggles with people who are in positions of perceived power. It could be power struggles in arguments and disputes involving resources, especially debt. Other people's resources that come from the outside and not through your own effort and hard work. And so there could be something here where you need to let go. Maybe you're pursuing something really aggressively involving money that should be coming from an outside source. And maybe you need to just let go and let it happen, right? Instead of just constantly being on it all the time. This could be, an argument that could come up within a partnership, a marriage partnership involving joint finances. And maybe you have to decide if you're going to keep going, pursue this, or if you're just going to let it go and let it be and, again, move on with life. Maybe there's some sort of action or blockage toward taking action involving, your joint finances and joint resources. Maybe there's some sort of debt that you need to take care of that you've been sort of ignoring, or maybe you've been pursuing it a little too aggressively and focusing too much attention on that, and you need to let it go. This is also the houses of obsessions. And so maybe there is something that you've been pursuing rather obsessively lately. And maybe this is sort of a wake up call, like, hey, maybe I need to let this go. Maybe I need to move on from this so that way I can make room for some other sort of pursuit, some other sort of interest. Maybe I'm doing it too much, and that's actually preventing things from unfolding in the way that I might want it to, right? So these are all different potentials with this energy that's happening with Mars conjunct the South Node. Okay, for Leo and for Leo rising, this is happening in your 7th house. And so this very likely will have to do with letting go of old resentments that you're harboring from the past in your relationships. This doesn't have to be a long-term marriage partnership or any sort of romantic relationship. This could be any close personal relationships or contracts where, you're holding on to anger, aggression, resentment, frustration, and maybe you never let it out, or maybe you did, but you're still harboring it. And so either, you could let it out. You can decide that you need to release it by actually expressing yourself if that's something that you don't normally do. Maybe you decide that, it's not worth pursuing, it's not worth arguing over, and you just let it go and you truly release that energy. It could also be that something comes from the outside. So you have somebody else that's harboring some sort of anger, resentment toward you from the past, right? And so maybe that comes up. Maybe there's an argument and dispute and you're on the receiving end of that, and you have to decide how you're going to react, right? Are you going to react or are you going to respond? Are you going to pursue the argument and argue your point, or are you just going to let it go and just say, okay, this happened, I'm going to move past this. I'm not going to let it ruin my day or my week. And I'm just going to keep focusing on what I need to do to, engage in my own self-interest, to develop my own courage, to be myself more authentically out in the world, because that's what Leos are focusing on right now. And for you, this is in opposition to your ascendant. So it's very literally someone acting in opposition toward you. And so, it's, do you want to fight this fight? Do you want to fight this battle, or should you let it go, right? And what is blocking you from acting on your own willpower, your own volition when it comes to your relationships? Is it that you're acting too aggressively and people will get defensive? Or is it that you're not taking action in the right way? You're just being very passive, and so nobody knows what it is that you want, need, or desire in your relationship. So paying attention to all of these different themes, especially for Leo rising within the first 10 degrees. If you happen to know the degree of your sun or rising sign, you're going to be feeling this the most strongly, and you'll be feeling next week's eclipse pretty strongly as well. For Virgo and for Virgo rising, this is happening in your 6th house, which is the house of work. It's the Virgo house. It's health, it's, service, it's day-to-day activities and routines. And, it's your nutritional habits, your workout routines, those types of things as well. And so maybe you've been pursuing this, being a Virgo, a little bit too hard, too fast. Maybe you're focusing too much energy on trying to control your health by doing too much in the way of nutrition and meal planning and taking like all the supplements all the time and working out really hard, really fast. And maybe something comes along that tells you, hey, maybe you need to stop. Maybe you get like a sprained something, or, you're straining your muscles and you're achy and you have to take a break and sit this one out, that type of thing. But there could be a call to just kind of tone it down a notch and to let things go. This could also bring up old resentments, old hostility, old anger that's directed toward coworkers or toward your work situation in general. If there's something that you've been needing to change and take action on in your day-to-day work routines, especially as it relates to not just your daily routines, but your workplace, right? Because this is the context of where you work, where you go to work every single day, but also your relationship with your coworkers. Maybe you have a coworker that's been slacking off and you've been holding it in and bottling it up, and you've been very resentful of the fact that you have to pick up the slack for them, and maybe you have to say something to them finally if you haven't said anything, and you feel like it's the right thing to do. Or maybe you decide that I've been picking too many fights about this, I'm just going to let this go, and I'll just let my bosses see that I'm doing really good work. I'm not going to worry about what other people are doing. And maybe the conflict comes from the outside, and you have to decide if you're going to engage with that, if you're going to fight, or if you're going to let it go, right? And so this is also going to bring up anything that's blocking your ability to act on your willpower very decisively when it comes to day-to-day routine tasks, when it comes to your work and the work that you're doing. Anything that's blocking your ability to control what it is that you're doing in your day-to-day life when it comes to your work and your work schedule, that type of thing can be very irritating for a Virgo. Even though Virgos are really good at micromanaging others, they don't like to be micromanaged. And with Aquarius on your 6th house cusp, there's a need to be able to do things in your own way when it comes to your work, to have freedom and independence in your work. You want your bosses and the people, if you do have bosses, you want them to trust you to do things the right way without having to micromanage you, because you are, usually very organized and very efficient. And so maybe, that's something that you have to confront or deal with. So that's Virgo and Virgo rising. For Libra and Libra rising, this is going to be happening in your 5th house of romance, of children, of your passions, your hobbies, your interests, the things that you love to do because you love to do them. And so, it could be that you're really trying to pursue someone romantically, or maybe you're harboring resentment from like some sort of old romance where it didn't work out the way that you wanted to, and you feel angry still about it, and deep down inside you know that you need to let go and release this, either by expressing your anger or by letting it go truly and fully and surrendering that feeling. There could be issues that come up involving your children or the father of your children, where there could be some sort of dispute, some sort of anger, some sort of aggression. It could be maybe that your kids are being a little unruly, and maybe normally you're not quite so stern with them, but you decide that you need to, maybe raise your voice a little bit or be a little bit more direct. Maybe you've been letting them walk all over you. Maybe you've been a little bit too intense, in terms of your parenting, and maybe you realize you need to surrender, let it go, and let the kids be kids. That's something that could come up as well. This could also be you pursuing something that you're really passionate about and pursuing it rather aggressively and obsessively. And, maybe it's time to release, let go, and stop trying to force things on a romantic level. Stop trying to force things with your children. Stop trying to force things when it comes to your hobbies, your interests, the things that you're passionate about, and just allow it to be, because the things that you do for fun become a lot less fun when you're trying to force it to happen, right? And so that could be part of what's coming up for Libras as well. And then for Scorpio and for Scorpio rising, this energy is happening in your fourth house of the home, family, and property. And so maybe you've been trying to initiate some sort of action involving your family, involving your home, involving your place of living. Maybe you're thinking about initiating a move, or something along those lines. You've been really trying to force it to happen in a certain way. And you realize that maybe you just need to let it go. Maybe, you can't force it. Maybe there's a different plan in store for you. Maybe you've been trying to take action when it comes to your home and your place of living, when you've been wanting to initiate something new, and you realize that there's a blockage, right? There's something that you need to release that's blocking you from actually acting in the way that you need to be acting. This could also be you needing to release anger, resentment, hostility toward family members and people who you surround yourself with in your home environment. And so if that's the case, you have to decide, am I going to express this through an expression of anger outwardly and release it in that way? Or do I just need to let this go, right? Do I just need to let this anger and hostility go? And on the same token, you might actually be on the receiving end of that from a family member. And so if that's the case, again, you have to make a decision, right? Am I going to fight back? Am I going to argue about this? Or am I going to accept what I'm hearing and just sort of, ruminate on it? Maybe think about what they're saying, or am I just going to let it go, right? Am I going to react to this, or am I going to respond to it? That's sort of the choice that you're making there. But there isn't a need to let go to surrender something in terms of acting on your willpower, and a need to push something through in a certain way. I need to do things based on your own volition, your own willpower, and to just accept, what fate might have in store for you, because there are changes coming up for you in this area. It's just a matter of how they're going to come about, and if you're going to allow it to come about, because you might be blocking it with your willpower, right? And then for you, this is actually, especially if you have your sun, moon, or rising in the first 10 degrees of Scorpio, so through the first to 10th degree, especially at that 5th degree right in the middle, you're going to be having Mars and the South Node in a square with your ascendant or with your sun sign, or even your moon if you're listening to your moon. Sometimes people do that. And so this could be an anger, aggression, hostility that's challenging you in some sort of way where you're being challenged directly. It's being sort of directed toward you, right? And so you have to face this a little bit more head on in that circumstance, or, you have to decide, is the way to face this challenge to really engage in my willpower if that's what I normally do? You're a Scorpio, you're very strong-willed, you're very persistent. Or, is this one of those circumstances where you have to use the other energy of Scorpio, which is about purging, letting go, releasing, realizing that I don't need this anymore. And then, because Scorpio is very black or white, either you're really in it or you're just not, either you're going to pursue it head on, fully and completely until it's done, or you're just going to completely let it go. And so, that's a decision Scorpios might have to make this week. Oops. For Sagittarius and for Sagittarius rising, this is happening in your third house, and the third house has to do with siblings, extended family members, your community, short distance travel, vehicles. things of that nature. It also has to do with education, especially like things like certificates and, smaller education programs, elementary education, learning languages, learning practical skill sets. And so maybe there's something that you're trying to really push through in this area, and you realize, it's not worth pushing this hard. Maybe I need to surrender and let go. Maybe it's that, things are not working out because it's not supposed to happen in this way, and I need to pay attention and sort of wait a little bit before moving forward again. And again, thinking back to that time, the first and second week of June, so like June 8th, around that time, if something came up to you for you involving education, involving short distance travel, or even long distance travel, you can talk about the opposition too. Siblings, maybe disputes with extended family members or siblings that came up, and you have to sort of address that. Maybe you've been holding on and harboring resentment toward a sibling or an extended family member, and you haven't really let it out or released it. And so you have to decide, this is coming up for me again. Should I address this head on so that way it can just be done and over with? Or is it worth doing that? Maybe I should just let it go and stop harboring this resentment and clear this space so that way moving forward, we can have a better relationship. This could also be sort of anger and hostility that comes through communication. It could be that you receive, an email or a text message or some sort of form of communication from somebody that is overtly aggressive or passive aggressive, and you have to decide, how am I going to respond to this? Am I going to attack this? Am I going to fight, or am I going to just let it go, right? And just move on. And so that's kind of what's going on for Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising for, this week, especially into this weekend. For Capricorn and Capricorn rising, this energy is happening in your second house of finances. And so this could bring up themes surrounding maybe you're really, really working really hard and really aggressively trying to build resources for yourself, doing things in a very specific way that you've decided is the right way. And maybe it's not working. Maybe you're coming up against a lot of frustration when it comes to your resources. Maybe the bills are piling up. Maybe you're just not getting the growth that you want for all of the hard work and effort that you're putting in. And so if this is the case for you, just take a step back and pay attention to what's happening for you, because maybe this isn't the way, right? Maybe this isn't the best way to be pursuing things. Maybe pursuing things super aggressively instead of just allowing them to happen, especially when you have the North Node right now transiting your 8th house. Money can come from outside sources. It's not about working really, really hard all the time, even though you're a Capricorn, right? To create these resources, you could create resources through investments. It could come through marriage partnership, through an outside source. So just being open-minded about that over the next couple of weeks, but especially, into this weekend. There could be disputes that come up involving money, finances, resources, where you have to decide, am I going to pursue this, or am I just going to let it go so that way I can move on to something else? There could be, it could be maybe that you're normally very passive about these things and you just let it slide. So maybe now you need to assert your dominance, and you need to say, this enough is enough. You need to put your foot down. Or on the opposite end, maybe you have been putting your foot down and maybe that's not working. Maybe you need to lighten up a little bit and loosen up a little bit. And so, whatever it is for you, there's going to be a sense of, there's some sort of blockage to you acting on your willpower in order to create and accumulate resources for yourself. And so what is that blockage? What does it look like? How do I release it? How do I let go? So that way, moving forward in September, I'm able to move forward with this project, this plan, whatever it is that you're doing in this area. And you're going to have clarity. You're going to have the green light. You're not going to have all of these blockages because you're accessing your willpower effectively and efficiently. And if there are any old resentments that you're holding on to involving resources, so maybe somebody owes you money or, whatever it is, that might come up for you this weekend. You might have to decide if you're going to address it or you're going to let it go. For Aquarius and Aquarius rising, this is happening in your sign. And so, the anger, the aggression, the hostility might be directed toward you in this situation, or you might be in any area where you're harboring resentment, where you're harboring anger, where you're letting sort of these old angry energies dictate the way that you take action out in the world. You really need to think about, am I going to continue on in this way, or am I going to let this go? Am I going to address this? Am I going to face it head on? Am I going to express it, or am I going to let it go? In general, this is about blockages to your own personal willpower and volition. So if you feel like you've been trying to do something and pushing forward and taking all this action and it's just not working out, you're coming up against a lot of frustration, a lot of irritation. Maybe you're, bumping into things and getting into these little accidents here and there. It's because there's an energy that's bottled up here that needs to be released and let go. There's a blockage to your willpower, and there's something that you need to look at. So paying attention to what's coming up for you in the way of frustration, messages, signs, synchronicities, especially as they relate to the way that you're taking action out in the world, that's going to be especially important for Aquarius and Aquarius rising people, because this is something fated. You're holding on to an old way of doing things, and this old way of doing things is clearly not working anymore. So paying attention to especially the way that people in your relationships react to you as you're trying to push these things forward, as you're trying to continue on in the exact same way, because the opposition to this is obviously going to be your descendant. So your relationships are going to be your best mirror. They're going to be your best asset in navigating this energy, and they can provide really good advice for you too. Maybe you don't want to pay attention to it because you're sort of dogmatically and rigidly holding on to the way that you want things to be. And if that is the case, maybe lighten up, let it go, stop trying to push it through, and just see, you know, what other people have to say about it. Maybe there's some good advice, maybe there's some good direction that you can get out of this, or at the very least, it'll allow you to take some time away outside of the situation so you can release and let go of those frustrating parts, or maybe you can see things a little bit more clearly. But this is really helping you to unlock and unleash your willpower through the art of surrender, because it's not always about go, go, go. Sometimes you gotta take a step back and breathe and pay attention. Think back to what happened around June 8th and what came up for you, and see if any of those themes are revisited this weekend, because that's going to be a cue as to what you're working on right now in that area. For Pisces and for Pisces rising, this is happening in your 12th house. The 12th house is the house of symbolism. It's an archetypal house. It's more about dreams. It's more about like the collective consciousness. It's more about spirituality, synchronicities, these types of things. So it's about your spiritual practice. Anything that you've been holding on to in terms of resentment that's been buried, anger that's been buried, because this is also the hidden house. It's things that are going on behind the scenes and behind the surface. It might come out for you right now, and it might come out in a surprising way through a dream, through a vision, through some sort of precognitive material that comes to you. And so just pay attention, because there might be something that you're holding on to that you need to release, or a way of doing things that you're holding on to that you need to release. And you could get messages through these different means of receiving psychic messages and things like that, or intuitive messages. The other thing that could be happening, this is the house of hidden enemies. And so Mars in the 12th house tends to bring the hidden enemies out, where they're working against you a little bit more overtly. Again, not going to be the case for all Pisces people, but you could find yourself in a situation where you find out that somebody's been talking bad about you or doing something behind your back, and you might have to decide, am I going to address this and face it head on? Am I going to let go and just, let it slide? Or am I just going to let go of that relationship or, that situation entirely? So that could come up for you at this time. This is also where maybe you've been trying to force your spiritual practices. Maybe you've been trying to force your creativity. And as most of us know, that doesn't really work quite so well if you're trying to force it. The creative state or the meditative state or the state of psychic awareness and intuition is more of a receptive sort of state. And so if you're pushing and trying to make things happen in the way that you want them to happen, it's probably not working well for you. So maybe it's about learning the art of surrender when it comes to those types of practices and situations. And so that's kind of what's going on here for Pisces and Pisces rising. And so that is the forecast for all 12 signs. I hope that you found this information helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comment section below. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You've all been really awesome, like watching these videos, leaving comments. I love reading and responding to your comments. That's one of my favorite things about doing these videos. And so I'll see you again next week. And I hope you have a really wonderful week. I have a couple other videos coming up for you and some surprises for you guys for this week. So I'm excited. And so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. All right, bye.